Am I wrong for wanting a partner with more ambition? Okay, tell me if I'm crazy here. Am I actually losing my mind? My boyfriend, Noah, broke up with me, or maybe evaporated is a better word, because I made one honest comment about his career path in front of our friends. And I don't mean we had a fight or a dramatic, we need a break speech that ends with tearful promises to work on things. I mean he just vanished. Poof. Gone. 1 minute he was sitting next to me, the next his side of the closet is empty, and his toothbrush is gone from the holder. How is that a proportional response to anything? He just gets to throw away 2 years of our life, of everything we built, over a single sentence. I keep replaying that night in my head, a torturous loop, and all I feel is this burning, gut-wrenching unfairness. It feels like a prank, like I'm going to wake up and he'll be making coffee in the kitchen, laughing at my weird dream. But he's not. I was just saying what everyone in that room was probably thinking anyway. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't meant to hurt him. It was practical. It was about our future, for God's sake. But apparently in his world, that makes me the monster. He gets to be the noble, wounded artist, martyred for his craft, and I'm the materialistic, soulless bitch who doesn't appreciate his passion. Seriously, what am I supposed to do with that? He won't answer my calls, he won't reply to my texts. It's like I've been blocked from existence. He just erased me. And for what? For being realistic. Someone please tell me how that's fair. Here's the thing, Noah was solid. He was a good man. I know that sounds like a cliché you say after a breakup, but it was true. He was kind, patient, and had this incredible way of listening, really listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. He was the kind of guy who'd remember a random comment I made weeks ago about a book I wanted to read and have it waiting on my pillow. He worked as a senior antique restorer, a profession I used to find incredibly romantic. I loved visiting his workshop, the air thick with the scent of sawdust and old varnish, watching his hands move with a surgeon's precision to coax life back into wood that had been silent for centuries. There was a quiet dignity to it, a sense of permanence that felt like an anchor in my often chaotic life. But that anchor started to feel like a drag about 6 months ago when I finally broke into this new friend group from work. These weren't my old college buddies. These were people on a different trajectory. Pierce works in venture capital. Cassandra is a lead developer for a tech startup that's about to go public. They spoke a different language, a dialect of IPOs, quarterly growth, and scaling strategies. I remember one dinner where Pierce was casually discussing a 7-figure seed round for some app that, as far as I could tell, just organized your grocery lists. They all nodded seriously, talking about user acquisition and monetization. The numbers they threw around were abstract, unreal, and I loved it. I felt energized, important, like I was finally playing in the big leagues. But when I brought Noah to these gatherings, I started to feel small. The conversation would shift to him, and he'd talk with genuine excitement about the intricate dovetail joints on a 19th century secretary desk he was restoring. And they'd be polite, of course, saying things like, "Oh, how fascinating." But I could see it. The subtle shift in posture, the quick, shared glance between Pierce and Cassandra. It was a look that said, "Oh, that's cute. A hobby." It was condescending, and it made my skin crawl with a second-hand shame that felt entirely my own. I started to preemptively manage the conversation, trying to translate his work into their language. "He restores antiques," I'd say, and then I'd rush to add, "He's very specialized, works with major museums and private collectors," as if I needed to add a disclaimer of prestige. I started seeing him through their lens. His quiet confidence began to look like a lack of ambition. His passion for his craft started to sound less like a calling and more like a hobby that happened to pay the bills. His stability didn't feel like a comfort anymore. It felt like a ceiling, a beautifully carved but very low ceiling. I should have seen it coming. God, the warning signs were all there, practically glowing in neon, but I dismissed them as him just being overly sensitive. There was this one time, a few months back, we were at the City Art Museum. We were standing in front of a beautifully restored Rococo commode, all gleaming marquetry and ornate bronze fittings. I was admiring it, saying something generic about how pretty it was. But Noah, he was practically vibrating with a quiet, intense energy. He leaned in, his voice low and full of reverence. "See this curve here," he whispered, tracing its line in the air. The original craftsman would have spent weeks just shaping this piece. And see the grain? It was damaged by water, completely warped. I spent almost a month just slowly, millimeter by millimeter, coaxing it back into shape. He wasn't just talking about wood and glue. He was telling a story of resurrection. His eyes had this light in them, a fierce pride that was almost holy. Then he turned to me, his expression dead serious. "Sabrina, this is real. This is tangible. People pour their entire lives into learning how to do this. It's a fight against a world that just wants to throw things away and buy new ones." He took my hand. "The one thing I can't stand," he said, his grip tightening slightly, "is when people dismiss this work. When they treat it like a quaint little pastime, like it's not as serious or important as, I don't know, trading stocks on a computer screen. It's a slap in the face to generations of artisans." At the time, I just squeezed his hand back and said, "I know, honey, it's amazing what you do." But was I really listening? No. I heard the words, but I didn't feel the weight behind them. I just thought he was being a bit of a purist, a little overly dramatic. I filed it away under Noah's cute idealist quirks. It wasn't a warning to me. It was just a part of his personality. I never understood that for him, it wasn't a quirk. It was his core. It was the absolute, uncrossable red line. The dinner party was at Pierce's apartment, one of those sterile, minimalist places with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that screamed, "I'm richer than you." The air was thick with the usual chatter of market trends and disruptive tech. I was on my second glass of expensive wine, feeling that familiar buzz of anxiety and excitement, desperately trying to keep up. Noah was being his usual quiet, charming self, mostly listening, asking thoughtful questions about their work without a hint of judgment. Then Cassandra turned to him. "So, Noah," she said, her tone friendly but with that hint of clinical curiosity she applies to everything. "Restoring old furniture must be so cool. Like being on one of those historical TV shows, right? It seems so relaxing." I saw Noah take a breath, a small, genuine smile on his face. He was about to launch into one of his passionate explanations, the kind I used to find so endearing. He was going to talk about the soul of the wood, the story of the object. He was going to gently correct her, explaining that it was less relaxing and more all-consuming. He was going to be Noah. But in that split second, a wave of pure, unadulterated panic washed over me. I saw it all in slow motion. The polite, blank smiles already forming on their faces as he talked about joinery techniques. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment, not for him, but for me, for being the girlfriend of the quaint craftsman in a room full of innovators. And I just couldn't bear it. My own ambition, my own insecurity became a toxic acid in my throat. So I cut him off, mid-breath. "Well, yes," I said, my voice suddenly louder, more performative than I intended. I leaned forward, placing my wine glass down with a definitive click, commanding the table's attention. Noah's work has its own unique value, of course. I looked around the table, making eye contact with Pierce, with Cassandra, as if I were presenting a quarterly report. But if we're talking from a perspective of asset appreciation and future potential, it's really more of a passion asset, isn't it? It's emotionally fulfilling, but it lacks leverage. I actually said the word leverage. I can still hear it hanging in the air, so alien and corporate and utterly disgusting. "I'm constantly telling him," I continued, feeling a horrifying sense of momentum, an out-of-body experience where I could hear myself talking but couldn't stop the words from spilling out, that he should apply his incredible skills to something with more scalable impact. Imagine that precision in product design or luxury brand management. It's about channeling that talent into a more forward-thinking career path. Silence. It wasn't just quiet, it was a vacuum. The air got sucked out of the room. The ambient city noise from the window seemed to roar into the void. Pierce stared into his wine glass as if it held the secrets of the universe. Cassandra developed a sudden, intense interest in the weave of her napkin. The only sound was the clinking of my own fork against my plate, a nervous tick I couldn't control. And then I dared to look at Noah. The color had completely drained from his face. It wasn't anger or shock. It was a look of utter and complete devastation, as if he'd just watched me take a hammer to his most prized creation. In my desperate attempt to look like I belonged in their world, I had just publicly, and with a flourish, declared that his world, the one he cherished above all else, wasn't good enough for me. The car ride home was a tomb. The silence was so heavy it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I kept trying to start a conversation, to say something, anything, to break the tension. "Pierce's apartment is nice, huh?" I'd venture, my voice sounding shrill and pathetic in the quiet. Noah just kept his eyes on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He didn't even grunt in response. He just drove. When we got back to our apartment, the silence followed us inside. I expected an explosion. I was bracing myself for yelling, for accusations, for him to demand an explanation for my humiliating little performance. That I could have handled. A fight has rules, a back and forth. But he didn't give me that. He walked into the living room, dropped his keys on the coffee table, and just sat on the edge of the sofa. He didn't look at me. He just stared at his hands, turning them over and over as if he'd never seen them before. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was unnervingly calm, devoid of any anger. It was worse than anger. It was empty. "You know," he started, still looking at his hands, "I've had people not understand my work before. They think it's dusty or boring. That's fine, they don't have to get it." He finally lifted his head and looked at me, and his eyes were just tired, so profoundly tired. "But you, Sabrina, you didn't just misunderstand it. You understood it perfectly. You knew exactly what it means to me. And you took that, the most personal, most important part of who I am, and you offered it up as a sacrifice to impress those people." He shook his head slowly, a gesture of pure disbelief. "You weren't trying to help me. You were just embarrassed by me. You stood there and you filleted my life's passion to make yourself look good. You used me as a stepping stone to get a nod of approval from them." He stood up then. "You killed the one thing that made this relationship work," he said, his voice finally cracking with a sliver of pain. "The belief that we were partners, that we were on the same team. I can't come back from that. I'm so tired." And that was it. That was the last real conversation we ever had. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my alarm, a jarring buzz in a room that felt unnaturally still. I rolled over, reaching for him, my hand hitting a cold, empty space on the mattress. That's when the panic started, a slow, icy dread creeping up my spine. I sat bolt upright. His pillow was perfectly smooth, unslept in. I jumped out of bed and ran to the closet. His side was bare. The neat rows of flannel shirts, his favorite worn-in jeans, the one suit he owned for weddings, all gone. I stumbled into the bathroom. His toothbrush was missing from the holder. The bottle of his specific, woodsy-scented shower gel was gone. His razor wasn't on the shelf. It was a systematic, surgical removal. He hadn't just left, he had erased himself. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock it. I called him. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a frantic barrage of texts. "Noah, where are you? We need to talk about this. I'm so sorry. Please just call me." No reply. I checked his social media. Blocked. Everything. It was a digital wall, absolute and impenetrable. In a state of pure adrenaline-fueled desperation, I started calling our mutual friends, the ones from the dinner party. I called Cassandra first, my voice a high-pitched, sobbing mess. I explained that Noah had left, that I'd woken up and he was just gone. I was hoping for sympathy, for her to say, "Oh my God, he's totally overreacting. I'll talk to him." Instead, there was a long, awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, wow, Sabrina," she finally said, her voice laced with a discomfort that was almost palpable. That's really rough. I'm sorry to hear that." It was the kind of polite, detached sympathy you'd offer a stranger. "Listen, I'm just heading into a meeting, but I hope you guys can work it out." I got a similar response from Pierce. A stilted, "Geez, that sucks. Let me know if there's anything I can do," which was clearly code for "Please don't involve me in this." They weren't taking sides. They were just backing away slowly. The very people whose approval I had so pathetically craved were now treating me like I was radioactive. I had made a fool of myself for them, and in my moment of crisis, they wanted nothing to do with me. Weeks have passed. The anger has mostly curdled into a dull, constant ache of humiliation. I spend my days going through the motions, and my nights scrolling through my phone, trapped in a self-destructive loop. I keep telling my best friend, Jessica, that I'm over it. Honestly, it's for the best, I said to her on the phone just last night, my voice brittle with forced cheerfulness. He had no ambition. I need a partner who's on my level, you know. This just proves we were fundamentally incompatible. I heard her sigh on the other end, the sound of a friend who knows you're lying, but is too kind to call you on it. After I hung up, the bravado evaporated, leaving the silence of the apartment to rush back in. I started cleaning, a frantic, pointless activity to keep my hands and mind busy. I was wrestling with a stack of old magazines in the study when my hand brushed against a dust cover on a small table in the corner. A table I rarely paid attention to. Curious, I pulled the cloth away. Underneath was a miniature model, an exquisitely detailed, perfectly rendered replica of a bookshelf. It was stunning. It had tiny, intricate latticework on the sides and perfectly crafted dovetail joints, even at that small scale. It was the exact bookshelf I had torn out of a design magazine months ago, gushing to Noah about how it was my dream piece for the study. Tucked beneath the model was a thick manila folder. I opened it. Inside were pages and pages of detailed architectural drawings, precise measurements, and wood sourcing lists. He had been designing it for me. Not just designing it, he was planning to build it himself. The entire project was mapped out, a testament to dozens, if not hundreds, of hours of secret, loving work. On the corner of the top blueprint in his familiar, neat pencil script was a small note. It wasn't for me, it was for him. It read, "For Sabrina's dream space, the heart of our future home." I dropped the folder. The papers scattered across the floor. I sank down amidst the plans for a future I had single-handedly destroyed, clutching the miniature model of a dream I didn't deserve. And for the first time, with no one to perform for, no one to blame, I finally, completely broke down.